Hi, my name is Ellie, and you're watching the EZChannel, where we keep things simple and easy. Today we have a very... It's all good.
No, go.
A very special guest.
I'm Emily Zickner, and I didn't figure out an intro.
We will be discussing the basics of comics in our Comics 101 session.
Yep, there's a lot of different ways to get into comics, but we just wanted to help you guys make it simpler a little bit and explain some of them.
So if you are unsure of how to get into comics or had trouble with it in the past, this video is for you. In this video, you'll notice I'm more of a Marvel fan.
And I'm more of a DC fan.
But together,
we create one YouTube video! Quick disclaimer, we're just comic book fans. We're not all-knowing icons, and our opinions are gonna color what we say, so just be aware of that.
Also, just as a note, we mainly talk about DC and Marvel in this video, so if you want to learn about independent companies or smaller companies, we'll be talking about those as well, but not as in-depth. So we'll put a link in the description down below of where you can to skip in the video to see that.
Okay, so personally, I got into comics through the DC Rebirth event back in May of 2016.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yep.
For me, I ended up getting into comics through one particular hero, Daredevil. I'll talk a little bit more about it in the
later on
in the video.
Yes.
But I'll go more in depth. But basically, I really liked the Netflix TV show and I wanted to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose of this video, to introduce different ways to get into comics more easily. First off, we're going to start with events and runs.
Okay, so events are several heroes up to company-wide initiatives. That's an actual event happening in the fictional universe. And a run is one particular creator's take on a hero. The pros of events is that you get introduced to a lot of heroes at once, so you get to know how they interact and a little bit of their history and what they do. And they have a definite storyline, and usually, I mean not always, because it's comic books and they want to go on forever, but they usually have more of a definite end, rather than ongoing comics, which on-go. However, the cons is they build on history normally. There's not many that just we're starting anew. So they're gonna reference things that you're probably not gonna know, and they just usually they assume that you know some history. And also they generally tend to be a bit longer, and there's gonna be a lot more of them. For example, Blackest Night here, which was I don't remember when it was exactly, but it was a big company initiative for DC. It spanned all of their heroes. There is, I believe, about 5 volumes that you have to collect to read the whole thing, and each book is about $20, or it could be more, so that's kind of a steep fee to pay. If you're more interested in Marvel, Civil War is an event of theirs, and there's Sacred Wars, and there's others.
Emily already explained the difference, but pretty much it's just when one person writes a set of comics for a specific character or group. A pro of it is that you only focus on one specific character or group, so you get a consistent characterization of that group because it's only one person's opinion on a very few characters. However, that in itself is kind of a con because you don't get introduced to a bunch of different characters, but it's easier for you and to handle in a smaller dose. And then also, if that author's characterization ends up being really weird and uncharacteristic compared to the rest of the franchise for that specific character, then you're going to be getting something a little bit different than everyone else and what they're reading. They have a very consistent start and end, so usually you'll be at the very first book until the last book. A good example of this is from DC, Booster Gold by Dan Jurgens. He had a very consistent run. How many volumes was it?
Oh geez, he wrote for most of them. I can't remember. There's 6 volumes in the Boosters thing all along, but I think he wrote for 5.
Okay, yeah. So that's for DC. For Marvel, this one I like. This is my favorite. Actually, it's not my favorite author, but I love Daredevil.
Subtle roast.
So, Daredevil by Mark Waid is a great run to start with if you're interested in getting into that character. Mark Waid actually did 2 runs, so he is a little unique. I actually recommend Devil at Bay, his second run. It's really cute, it's really weird, it's different than the other Daredevils, but it's a lot better than the first run. But the first run is good for getting introduced to the character if you don't know anything about Daredevil. So the next big thing that's helpful for just getting into comics is focusing on less popular heroes. The nice thing about less popular heroes is that there's a lot less content overall for them because there's been less demand. So you can focus in on those few topics and things so that way you actually get to really know the character.
Yeah, however, a con is there's less content, so, I mean, I own most of the comics Booster's in, and it's not that many, so that's a thing. You better be able to find an event book from, 1989 if you want to find all of them.
And he'll say 2 sentences, and
you'll freak out.
So, just getting into the examples of some of these heroes, Emily already mentioned Booster Gold, so why don't you tell us more about him?
Booster Gold, he was invented by Dan Jurgens, the guy that we mentioned before, in the 80s. And yeah, he's should I talk about his character here?
Yeah.
He is a time traveler. He comes from the 21st century. He traveled back here to make a living, basically. He stole his superhero gear from a museum he worked in. And so he's kind of a sleazeball, but ends up giving up all of what he wants, his fame and fortune, to save the universe as a time traveler.
But another example of a less popular hero is Daredevil. He had one film in the early 2000s that had
Ben Affleck, guys.
So he appeared in that film, and that's what really got me interested as a kid. I was 8. I was like, this is so cool! But I kind of forgot about him until the Netflix show came about. The nice thing is with Daredevil, he was invented around the 80s, I think by Stan Lee, don't quote me on that, but he basically got forgotten about after his one comic, and until another author,
was it
Frank Miller?
Yeah, Frank Miller.
Frank Miller kind of revived him, and so a lot of the content starts from his interpretation of the character, because there wasn't really much interpretation of him beforehand. So for the most part, all Daredevil content is fairly consistent, and there's not much of it, so you can feasibly read all of it, unlike Superman, who's been around since
the 30s,
who has probably over thousands of comics.
Yeah, I mean, no, even just the main series, Action Comics, is almost reaching its 1000th issue at this point.
Yeah, and that's not humanly possible to read.
For the, I believe, 4th thing on our list, we have origin stories. So kind of if it's a story that has origins or beginnings or any words like that in the title, it will probably detail the hero's origins, crazy as that sounds.
Wow! Some of the pros of this are basically that, it's straightforward, it's very few comics, and it's a super easy introduction because it's literally, the introduction of how that character came to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but it's usually very short, so it's easy to read in a quick amount of time. However, there's not much story. It's usually really repetitive, because what happens is people will keep doing the same origin story over and over and over again. The Amazing Spider-Man Origin of Hobgoblin. As you can see, it says origin right there. This isn't a origin for a hero, so you're not going to learn about Spider-Man in this, but you are going to learn about one of, honestly, I think the best and funniest villains, the Hobgoblin. This one, it's not a single run or issue or anything like that. Basically what they did is they compiled a bunch of different stories that you needed to know about the origins of Hobgoblin. It told you what issues it's from, and it kind of put little footnotes of different references it had if you didn't understand something because it was a villain from a comic that it was talking about. But yeah, it's an easy way to learn about the villain.
So this next one is what I don't think this is any kind of official name, but we've chosen to call it single releases. And our example for this is Watchmen, which is my personal favorite book ever. Yeah, do you have anything to say?
So some pros and cons about the single releases. It's very similar to the less popular heroes. Basically, all the content you need for that single release is in that single release. All the world building, all the background, it's gonna be in there. The con is it only has one release.
But yeah, Watchmen, it's really good, and it's this was the only graphic novel ever to make it on Time's list of 100 best books. Yep. It's great, and it's kind of a classic thing. So that's one thing to read. It's all in one, and it's pretty much a staple of, I would say, a lot of comicsdom. Watchmen is a thing that you need to read. Not need, but you should read it, I would say, because it's very, very good.
But yeah, so single releases are a great way to dip your toe into comics. It's not really commitment since it's just one book.
Mm-hmm, yep. So if you hate it, you can just be like, well, I forgot that portion of my life. This is our like sixth section.
Yeah.
It's TV and movies.
So there's lots of different TV and movies. You've probably heard some of them, like Hollywood films. Like there's the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So big films like Captain America, Civil War, like the Iron Man movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, all stuff like that. They're all part of the MCU. And while these TV shows and movies aren't actually like comics, it's great if you haven't been introduced to characters in any way, shape, or form. Like you have no idea what the hell a comic book is, as Emily's shirt says. It's a great starting point.
Yeah. And they're definitely, I would say, a bit more accessible to the average person, because not everyone wants to sit down and read a big honking book, but I would say that you can almost anyone can put a TV show on in the background, especially like, you know, Daredevil, very accessible Netflix show, or there's lots of them, so, yeah.
Like with the movies in particular, there's the DC version of them, which is...
Yeah, the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, so that would be such movies as Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman.
But if you are good with that, like you watch the movies and that's all you need to know, great, we helped you in some way. But if you want to learn even more, but you're not quite ready to jump into the comic books yet, the TV shows are a great way to do it. There's live action TV shows like the Netflix ones, which I could make a whole nother video about because I'm very passionate about them.
They're very good.
Best is Daredevil, Luke Cage is great, Jessica Jones, like, is season 2 is amazing, season 1, mixed opinions. Iron Fist, it's not great. If you want to watch
Everyone has opinions.
to learn more about the rest of the Marvel TV shows, it's a decent idea, but you could also just read a synopsis.
Put it on in the background and do anything else. Get into pottery. There's also the DC TV shows that there is both live action and animated. The live action ones, I've not seen a ton of them.
They're usually very lighthearted. They're not super in-depth. They're not like super dark or anything like that. But it's lighthearted. It's good fun. It's engaging, but it's not like boring in any way. Supergirl and The Flash are my personal favorites out of the DC TV shows.
For DC specifically, I don't really know for Marvel. I know they have cartoons.
I'll get there.
They're not known for them. There's the cartoons and the animated movies. So I am a bad DC fan, so I have not actually watched the Justice League cartoons from the 2000s, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, I believe. They're supposed to be super good, so give those a watch if you want to. Young Justice is also supposed to be really good, and it's actually coming out with the 3rd season, I think.
Teen Titans is a classic as well.
So the movies right now for DC, they come out with them fairly often. I would say there's usually about 1 or 2 a year. They're really good. Justice League War is a fantastic movie if you want just a quick introduction to all of the Justice League characters. It is Batman, Green Lantern, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Shazam, and Cyborg. And then personally, another way, so we talked about events earlier, and this is kind of a tie-in with that. They'll make movies sometimes about particular events, like they had a movie for Flashpoint, they had a movie for The New Frontier, which was an event a while ago, I don't remember exactly when. They have movies, which are they're super accessible because it's like a cartoon movie, so it's like 90 minutes of your day and you just get a quick idea, and if you're interested in the characters and you liked what you saw, then you go back and you could get the comics for it, because Flashpoint, the movie is short, but then there's a ton of extra add-on comics that talk way more in depth about the characters and whatever.
There's also Marvel cartoons. There's not that many of them in comparison to the DC, because basically the MCU kind of took the Hollywood films by storm, but DC really took the comic, or like the comic book cartoon area.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Marvel cartoons are a lot less known, so they're still coming out with them. There's Spider-Man Unlimited and stuff like that.
Spider-Man ones, yeah.
My personal favorites are actually the older ones. I really, really, really love what's it called? It was basically Spider-Man, but it's the
the 90s one?
Yeah, or no, it was the 1993 cartoon. Like, it's just called Spider-Man, so it's a little hard to track down, but if you type in like Spider-Man 1993, usually you can find it. It's not the highest quality of cartoon, but I love it. It's a great introduction to not only Spider-Man and all of his villains and all of that, but there's also a ton of crossover events. It has actually a crossover with X-Men. The cartoon was called, at the time, X-Men the Animated Series, which is known to be very good. I haven't seen very much of myself, but oh my god, the crossover event they had with the Spider-Man show was amazing. So it's usually pretty quick, pretty easy introduction to all of the different characters, so you can go and look up like them in the comics later on. Next up we have like kind of the pros and cons of this. Basically, the pros for the TV shows, they're very easy to watch, they're very full stories, and they're pretty popular, so you can talk to people about them.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be more people watching a TV show than there is reading a comic book, and that's just how it is.
It's more accessible.
Yes, exactly. The cons are that they're going, like, the Flash characterization in the TV show, it's, like, a lot different than a lot of the older Flash stories. He's a younger character, they show him differently, so if you get used to that and then try to read the comics, it might throw you off a little bit. And there's just also just like differences, and they're gonna be longer, I would say.
YouTube is also a great way to learn more about comics. You can look up videos being like, who the hell is this character? And watch videos like ours, where we tell you and spoon feed you information about comic books.
If I had a spoon, this would be better, but here, viewer.
Yeah, so lots of YouTubers usually do like informational videos just about general bits of the character, and then also like analysis videos where they go deeper into it.
So one particular that we just have pulled up is Comics Historian. He's a really great guy, and he has a lot of informative videos.
He does lots of different videos on lots of different topics. We'll put the link to his channel in the description down below. Also, don't be afraid to go out and seek new YouTubers.
So our I've lost count point is smaller companies. We're finally here where we stop talking about Booster Gold and Daredevil.
Yay!
And start talking about like smaller creators.
So basically the kind of pros to this is there's a lot less content to sort through. You're supporting like smaller creators, sometimes even local creators. And then not only that, but there's just less to sort through overall, so usually the content is a lot more consumable. And
if it's a smaller creator, like we were talking about how runs are easier to digest because it's one guy's take. If it's a smaller creator, like, it will be just one person writing the story that they want to write, which is very cool. Since, like, one of my favorites is the Transformers comic, which is a slightly larger company, but the More Than Meets the Eye, it's just, like, James Roberts, he writes the whole storyline, and he will be able to write an end to it, and he wrote the whole thing. So that's really cool. It's just you get to see one guy's take on it without studio being like, well, okay, there's a couple of bits for Transformers, but it's like less of the studio being like, we need Superman to die because we have a thing coming up, so write him dying.
Another one that's really common, you'll probably see a lot of Dark Horse comics, for example, Hellboy. That's a very popular one. There was, Hollywood film made on it. I believe they're making a remake sometime soon, but Dark Horse is a producer of tons and tons of comics. I would say they're probably my favorite, like, independent company, so I highly recommend them. And then there is Image Comics.
Yeah, I should have brought it with me, but I forgot. But there's Snot Girl from Image Comics, which is like, it's, because we're talking about, like, this is superhero stuff or action, but Snot Girl, it's like a girl running a fashion blog, so it's a lot different.
Oftentimes with the smaller companies, too, like Emily was saying, you'll get a lot of different, types of storylines. So when we say comics, everyone always kind of thinks, oh, superheroes, fighting battles and stuff, and which is not always the case. There's tons of things, like Snot Girl is a fashion blog. Even if you don't really like superheroes, it doesn't mean you can't get into comics.
There's so many. It's a very wide genre. It's like saying that since I don't like romance novels, I can't get into reading. That's just not true. There's so much here that you can get into.
So if you're not really into the superheroes, which is what major companies usually tote or push off, a smaller company might be the best way to start off for you.
There are some cons. It's going to be harder to find the comics, and they might be a little bit more expensive or something because it's going to be a smaller creator.
And overall, for smaller companies and indie companies, there's just going to be less content just because they can't pedal out as much as a big company. So that's the end of our video. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe both to this video and both of our channels. I'm EZChannel.
I'm Zickner.
And yeah, we're going to be making another video. We'll be posting it very soon. We're thinking a title along the lines of
why you shouldn't get into comics. Woo!
So, if you want the other side of this, that video is going to be a little bit more entertaining, but yeah, I'll put a link in the description down below to EZChannel's channel, and I'll put a pop-up box around here somewhere. We're still figuring YouTube out.
We'll get it. Woo!
Alright, thanks, and bye-bye!